Right, good morning everybody. Thank you. Waking everybody up. For those with a weak constitution, I do apologise. It gets the blood flowing, doesn't it, Mr. Buckland? Right then, so welcome to today's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies. Any apologies today, Howard? Oh yeah. Oh yes, I've been told off. Because what the fan's on. We should be doing the fire safety announcement. There's no fire alarm planned for this morning, so if you do hear the fire alarm, please go out to the usual exits and we will be meeting in the car park next to the Windmill pub to ensure everybody is safe and well. So apologies for that. And the other apologies, we have got the fans going, obviously for obvious reasons. If they do become a problem and members can't hear us very well or think they're having problems hearing, please let me know. Wave, because I won't be able to hear you because of the fans. And we'll turn them off or turn some of them off. But I think it's a compromise at the moment with the heat we're bearing. I'd rather have to speak slightly more forcefully rather than sit here sweating and being really uncomfortable. So we're happy with that, everybody? Thank you. Good for that. So we will start again on item 1 of the agenda, which is apologies. Please, Howard.
Yes, good morning, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Rolfe and we have Councillor Jenny Fradley substituting.
Well done. You seem to be here more often. We're going to get you a special pass, Jenny. A gold star for turning up. Thank you. Item 2, the usual disclosure of interest. Have members any declarations they need to make for today's meeting? Councillor Keithley, please.
I'm not sure I need to say this, but I will anyway. We've got the playing pitch strategy on the agenda, and I am a member of the South Warwickshire Local Plan Advisory Group. I just wanted to say that. I'd already seen this, but I just wanted, just in case I needed to say that, I am a member of that group.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I don't think there's any real issues there, Maester, but yeah, better. And Mr. Buckland, please.
Chair, the other one, I guess just to mention, LGR, Local Government Reorganisation, is on the agenda. The monitoring officers previously provided a dispensation for members to talk about local government reorganisation, because if you didn't, you couldn't make a decision. But yeah, you've all got an interest in that, as have us as officers.
Thank you, Mr. Buckland. Item 3 on the agenda is minutes of the previous meetings held on the 28th of May and the 18th of June. Are members happy that they are true record and are about to sign them at a later date? Agreed. Thank you. Chair's brief, item number 4. Just a very brief one. Obviously, we've got Mr. Buckland here instead of Mr. Perks. Obviously, a bit of an upgrade, I was told. I think that was what Mr. Buckland told me to say. It's good to see Mr. Perks in the background here, in the audience. So glad you're doing well, and we look forward to you being next on the top table. So thank you, Mr. Perks, and yeah, glad to see you doing well. So thank you for that. Item 5 on the agenda is public participation. I've not received any questions from members of the public. Have you had any late ones, Howard? Yeah. I will use this because the last time we've had members of the public talk about the ICB. And it gives me an opportunity to, can members respond? I know most people have responded for the dates for the site visit to Ellen Badger, and I think on the 8th and the 11th of August, are they? Is that right, Howard? Yeah, the 8th and the 11th. So if you haven't responded, please let Howard know as soon as you can. I think most members have. Councillor Johnston, please.
Can we be clear? Is the date of the visit now fixed? Or having 2 visits?
No, so the SWIFT have given us 2 dates, the 8th and the 11th of August, to choose from. And so I've sent an email out asking all members what their preferred date is, so we're looking to select the date where the most members can attend, basically.
So that's not settled yet,
Yeah.
okay. And do we know who from Swift is coming with us?
Not yet, but I can confirm and let you know.
Okay.
I think we have made it clear we want somebody, a person or persons who are knowledgeable to accompany us, and otherwise it negates the effectiveness of the site visit. So, yeah, definitely. Any other points on that? Or we can move on to item 6, which is the Cabinet meeting of the 7th of July. I know that there's been some bit of a technical issue regarding the receipt of the Cabinet papers. And obviously, when you see the size of the Cabinet papers, you can't read these in 5 minutes. Well, you could do, but it'd be a waste of time. So I do realise there are issues, and perhaps the scrutiny might not be as thorough, as intense as we normally do because of the limited time we've had members who've had the papers. I got mine late yesterday afternoon. I have been looking online, and I know some people have difficulty looking at the papers online to make appropriate notes, and that's fine, and so I do appreciate that, so people do need the papers with them. I suppose this is one of the unintended consequences of actions of moving the meeting from Friday to the Wednesday, because that was done for other reasons, which again were reasonable. But having the meeting on the Friday, there was a certain amount of contingency if there was lateness in the delivery of the papers. So it is difficult, but if it becomes a regular problem, I think we might have to look at some alternative actions and options about this. But at the moment, if members we are slightly working in a restricted way, and I do apologise on behalf of the council that this is happening, and it's not an ideal situation, but I do think that we will just have to keep a watching brief on this to see if it's a regular occurrence and what impact it's having on the way we operate as a scrutiny committee. And members are happy with that? Good, this is what I'd like to see. Right then, so we've got 5 items, he says, just making sure there was 5 items on the Cabinet papers that we will be looking at. Should we just go through in the order they are in the papers, or has anybody got a preference? Mr. Buckland.
We were joined by Joe and Lydia from Planning Policy. It would be massively helpful, I'm sorry, I should have asked, if we could possibly do the South Warwickshire Playing Pitch strategy followed by the notice of motion. Would that be okay?
Yep, so we'll do...
Sorry, we do... Pardon me, I'll use my outdoor voice. We've got the playing pitch strategy. South Warwick, we've got Joe and Lydia to help us through that particular item. There's also a notice of motion. Now, John Careford has prepared the response to the notice of motion. John's at the LGA conference on behalf of Mr. Perks today. And therefore, it would be helpful if Joe could help us with that item. Obviously, John is the author, but if we could have some assistance from... So we'd do that one immediately after the playing pitch strategy.
So we'll do items 1 and 5 together, and then we'll decide the running order of the next 3 items after we've done that. So are we happy with that? Yeah? Good. Right then. So who wants to start, and which area do you want to start on first, Joe? We can give you that option. You can't.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Lydia's been leading on the playing pitch strategy, so she's happy to give an overview of the report. And we've also got the consultant that undertook the study, Jack, who's virtual. So if there's any detailed questions, I'm sure Jack will be able to help us out. But Lydia can introduce the item.
I think we'll have to turn some of the fans off at the moment. Yeah. saving his throat, so that's good. Right then, Lydia, I do apologise. A slight false start because of the fans. It's quite appropriate when we're talking about playing pitch strategy, and we have quite a few fans that decided playing pitches, don't we? So there was a tenuous link there. Come on, Councillor Keith, you can smile at that one. Right then, if you'd like to fire away, please, that would be very helpful.
I'm happy to provide a very brief kind of overview on the playing pitch strategy. So it's a very detailed study which has looked at the current level of playing pitch provision across the, it was done for both districts, so Stratford-on-Avon and Warwick, for the purpose of supporting the work on the South Warwickshire local plan, but it has uses much wider than that. So yeah, it's done a detailed assessment of all the pitch provision across the area, and it's also explored expected needs based on a number of various different scenarios. It's a very detailed study, hence why Jack is very helpfully kind of offered to come along and help with any detailed questions. But yeah, hopefully that's a brief overview.
That was very brief. Councillor Little, did you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, morning. I only received the papers yesterday, so and I looked at this and looked at it with interest because I think it's a very important area of work for the future of young adults and children, and all adults really these days. Health in older age is just as important as in younger age, and I'm sure the government would think so to keep the health and the NHS bill down. So, important work. One of the things that disappointed me is with this, and I don't mean in a critical way, but when I received it, most of the information that I wanted to have a look at is referenced in appendices. So I'm not clear about the scope. I'm not clear about the base data that you're working from and where we need to go to. So if you could elaborate on that, that would be great. And I represent a rural ward rather than a suburban ward, and so open spaces are just as important. And a lot of the playing fields are part of either local sports clubs or their or the parish council's properties. So just give me an overview, if you may, if I may ask you to do so, of the whole the scheme of the work that was done, please. Thank you.
Yeah, more than happy to. I'll give a kind of brief overview, and then if Jack wants to kind of add any further detail. So the playing pitch strategy has looked at various different sports. So it's looked at football, rugby union, rugby league, hockey, tennis, bowls, athletics and netball. It was a 10-step process to be in line with the Sport England recommended guidance. So it's a 10-step process that then is broken down into stages. So initially, kind of, we got the brief together, and then the assessment started. So stage B is where we've kind of gathered information and views and assessments of the playing pitches. So that's involved kind of liaisons with the national governing bodies, but also sports clubs. So Jack and his team kind of directly got in touch with them and asked them about the pitches and like their plans and things like that. Moving on to stage C, this kind of looked more at the supply and demand information. So again, lots of liaising with the sports clubs and national governing bodies to kind of get the kind of broader picture of sports pitches and their uses. And then, yeah, so stage D then looked at testing lots of different scenarios. So this using the information that was gathered from stage C and kind of the detailed assessments. It then looked to test different scenarios. So one of them was the standard method housing figures, which is obviously very important for the local plan. But lots of the sport national governing bodies wanted to test different things. So cricket, for example, if they wanted to improve grass wickets across the area, it looked what impact that would have on the various different deficit figures. So it was like testing all these different scenarios to see how they would impact pitch delivery and the deficits. And then stage E, which kind of hasn't happened yet, but that will just be us keeping it up to date. So a lot of detailed work has gone on. Hopefully that's broad. But Jack, is there anything that I've missed that's key there?
No, thank you, Lydia. I presume that you can hear me okay.
Yep, thank you, Jack.
Perfect. Yeah. So Lydia, thank you. That was really really detailed overview. Essentially, we have to follow the Sport England methodology for this playing pitch strategy for it to be kind of robust and signed off, and to be able to be used as a planning document. So as Lydia says, we start right from the very beginning. We use Sport England Active Places powered software as a starting point for all pitch provision. We also use previous playing pitch strategies and previous strategies. Then through a series of site audits, through consultation with sports clubs, national governing bodies, community groups, a range of people, we put together a very detailed supply and demand analysis, which tells us whether there is deficits in specific pitch provision for specific sports, or whether there's surpluses of provision. From that, as Lydia says, at stage D, the final stage, we're able to test a range of scenarios, mainly those about kind of population growth related to a range of different matters, whether that be housing developments or sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? Increase in participation, but also, as Lydia says, testing scenarios about pitch development, pitch improvement, a range of different things, which throws out a number of. From that, we're able to recommend, generate a range of recommendations about pitch provision in both Warwick and Stratford-on-Avon. So that is an overview of the playing pitch strategy.
Councillor Wally Huggins, please.
Yes, I'm sure that some of you would know that, I support Stratford
Just
Town.
get your microphone just a little bit closer.
Stratford Town Football Club, and I've looked at this, and I know that the provision that they've got at the football club, and at their own expense, are putting in, sports, all-weather pitches and so forth. But what comes to my mind when I'm looking at this is the financial implications, as there's no direct financial implications, but what are we going to do to support those clubs and facilities? I mean, that's used by the whole community for far more time, and I know that the pitch needs replacing. So can you tell me what the final, and this is not only to you, Jack, but also to Cabinet members and to officers, is to what sort of provision are we going to put into this to help clubs and facilities to maintain these pitches? Because we know that Stratford Town Football Club do need a renewal of their pitch. They've actually been into council to talk about it, and we've heard there's been absolutely nothing said about that. Because it's not just about building new pitches. I understand that from this document. It's about maintaining that. So to say that there's no financial implications, I'm just a little bit baffled by this. And can you tell me who your liaison was at Stratford Town Football Club and how much information they gave you? Thank you.
Can I come in there, Councillor?
Yep, please, Jack. Thank you.
Thank you. I completely agree with all that. It isn't just about developing new pitches, and the strategy does highlight at some point that the pitch at Stratford Town Football Club is not on the FA 3G pitch register, and therefore formally can't host formal competitive football. And it is highlighted that does need to be addressed. You'll have to forgive me. I cannot, off the top of my head, remember the contact that we spoke to at Stratford Town Football Club, but I can get that for you. But I think it was the kind of chief executive there, if that was his title. But yeah, we spoke to him on a number of different occasions about their plans, about their facility requirements, and the difficulties that they were facing on that site.
And did that include, did that include how they tried to get funding from this council, putting forward this document for funding for those existing pitches at the club? Because that's the key point, is how are existing facilities maintaining and financing it? Because we need to know what the financial implications are for these matters before us today. Thank you.
So the playing pitch strategy makes a number of recommendations and highlights where deficits are most prevalent, really. And in Stratford, there is a huge deficit of 3G pitch provision. As you can see from the documents, so Stratford, there's a total. When we look forward to 2050, there's going to be a deficit of six 3G pitches. So 6 additional 3G pitches will need to be delivered by 2050 if all community football clubs are to be catered for. Now, the role of the PPS is to highlight this to the Football Foundation, to Birmingham County FA, so that so it can inform their own strategies, like the local football facilities plan that should be developed on the back of this, where they highlight where funding, where investment, and where development should occur.
Councillor Johnston, please.
My understanding of this proposal is it's a planning policy document to contribute to the South Warwickshire local plan across the 2 districts. I think the revenue implications are that there are no revenue implications on the district council. I think Councillor Wally-Hoggins has misunderstood the nature of the proposal, and it reminds me of a proposal at the budget meeting when a park and ride scheme would be implemented in Wellesbourne to support the football club in Tiddington. I just think we should concentrate on what this proposal before us is.
Joe,
if I come in and then Joe can support. Predominantly, Councillor Johnston is right, is a document to help assist with the production of the South Warwickshire local plan, to identify deficits. So when we're looking at future developments, we can factor in new pitches in those kind of areas. The playing pitch strategy, though, is really helpful to clubs around the district as well. And we, in the absence of a playing pitch strategy, it has been difficult. It's been a barrier for some clubs to make applications for funding from regulatory bodies, Football Foundation, the FA, I don't know, through the rugby as well. And we have provided letters of comfort and support to clubs before, but with this in place, it should be easier for those clubs to obtain funding through those routes. So I think Joe wanted to make some points.
Yeah, no, I was going to make a similar point, but also in terms of the financial contributions that could be generated through the through new development, it's not necessarily just new pitches. It could also be financial contributions that can be used to improve existing pitches. So it can help with the if existing facilities need to be improved, as well as the provision of new, and that's why it's a really critical piece of evidence for the South Warwickshire local plan and then future plan applications, because it can be something that can be used to justify a requirement for a financial contribution through section 106 to improve existing facilities within an existing town, rather than just saying, well, we need a new this, we need a new that. It could be, well, it could be just that we need to improve a certain facility to cater for additional kind of residents, etc.
Councillor Wally-Hoggins, come back again. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. So existing facilities could bid for that 106 money. And I would also like to remind Councillor Johnston, my name is Councillor Wally-Hoggins and shouldn't really be referred to as she during a meeting. And can I just also say to you that the proposal for the park and ride was to alleviate the traffic issues in Wellesbourne primarily. It was a bus stop along the route that would help with traffic going to football club on pitch days. Nevertheless, this provides some comfort from what you've just said, Joe, as to how perhaps existing facilities can access funding. Can you tell me whereabouts that is in the playing pitch strategy? And also, I'd also like to say that I say again that there are ongoing financial implications for these pitches because they don't last forever, and it's how that financially moving forward, that is going to be what the provision for that is. And I think that when you're putting in a community bid and saying we need this, we do need to know how they're going to be maintained, who's going to pay for that maintenance, because when they need replacing, they're very, very expensive. So to have it by 2050, are the developers going to ongoingly replace that pitch every 20 years or so? How's it going to work? Thank you.
Yep, do you want to come back in, Joe, please?
Yeah, I mean, Jack might be able to advise more. I'm not sure the playing pitch strategy specifically goes into too much detail about funding, etc. But obviously, the requirements for SIL and Section 106 will be coming through the new South Warwickshire local plan and the policy requirements under that. In terms of kind of the capital and revenue funding, I mean, I assume there's lots of other funding sources, you know, from Sport England or other kind of organisations that can help fund, and, you know, obviously parish and town councils. It's not, there's other ways that kind of facilities can get funding for maintenance, etc., etc. Generally, Section 106 is a kind of like more kind of capital, but can include obviously revenue. Certainly for open spaces, we take maintenance and ongoing fees. So, yeah, that's something that can be looked at, but I think it's unrealistic to expect new development to fund everything, you know, the capital and ongoing maintenance of these facilities. There's other funding sources out there that can kind of contribute towards that as well, if that helps.
Thanks, Joe. Yep, Councillor Littlewood, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question of how this it will be looked at within the South Warwickshire local plan. Successful playing field installations bring people in to use it, and that's the whole purpose of them. I can think of one particular very successful club that uses parish council land to run football, has a very successful and buoyant number of children right up to adults who play competitions and matches, and it's excellent, but it causes absolute chaos with traffic because something like 75% of the people coming to use it, parents, etc., and adults themselves, come by car from outside of the area. So when this goes into the South Warwickshire local plan, I presume that the infrastructure to support that with car parking, etc., will be, particularly for the new build areas, will that be considered as part of the strategy itself? Otherwise, success on one side causes a lot of aggravation on the other.
Yeah, I can try and kind of help answer that little bit. In terms of how it would be considered for the South Warwickshire local plan, it'll link in and be a piece of evidence that the infrastructure delivery plan will be able to look at, and obviously that will look at the infrastructure requirements a lot more holistically. So it will link in with that. I personally don't have the exact answer of how the infrastructure delivery plan will be kind of done, but with Joe.
Yeah, I think it will be a combination of, obviously the South Warwickshire local plan sets the high level policy framework that will have the hooks then for any planning applications that would go into that level of detail about this specific supporting infrastructure that would be needed on a particular site. But certainly the policy framework through the emerging plan will be looking at that kind of ancillary kind of infrastructure as well.
Do you want to follow up on that?
Just a quick follow-up on that then. So if we take the situation that Councillor Wally Hoggins was referring to earlier of a very successful football club in the suburbs of Stratford-on-Avon, traffic is an issue there. But to thrive, these places have to be supported by the infrastructure. So will this report take into account those and make recommendations for the South Warwickshire plan for situations like that? So existing installations, which will hopefully will become more popular, will cause more grief and to local residents because of the amount of traffic and parking issues. This needs to be taken into account as well, but not just for new developments, but for existing developments, because if we want to make these things successful, then that's got to be taken into account.
Yeah, go on, Joe, and then I'll come back in.
Yeah, I don't know whether Jack might be able to come in. I don't know how much the playing pitch strategy itself covers that type of those kind of ancillary infrastructure, but it's certainly something we'll take away for, you know, the work that we're obviously doing on the South Warwickshire local plan about the importance of that. But I don't know whether Jack can comment on the extent to which the playing pitch strategy covers those kind of issues.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. The playing pitch strategy looks at ancillary provision, and it will make reference to where there are existing difficulties with car parking. But that comes through club consultation. It's not something that is within the Sport England methodology to look at car parking, and it's not. And I will admit it's not a specialism of mine. However, the playing pitch does look at ancillary provision for each and every site that we visit, but it's more to do with our pitch is well catered for in terms of changing provision, social spaces. Do they have the ability to generate revenue for themselves? Where we've made recommendations, particularly regarding 3G provision, parking and accessibility to sites is referenced, but it's not, it hasn't been key in the decision making in our recommendations. It's more about the location and which clubs investment and development would cater for.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jack. Yeah, Councillor Rice. Yep, go on. Then I'll.
I'd like to ask perhaps the opposite question, which is how does the South Warwickshire local plan inform the playing pitch strategy, given that there are still 12 new settlements and 24 strategic growth sites to be identified? How does the playing pitch strategy, how is that informed by the decisions that have yet to be made on those areas?
Maybe our planners might be able to
Yeah.
assist with that.
Joe, Lydia.
Yeah, I can come a little bit and help answer that one. Obviously there are still a lot of decisions to be made on the South Warwickshire local plan, so we haven't been able to hone in and look at the specific population growth in each area. So the scenario that was tested for the South Warwickshire local plan was a standard method housing figures, which looked more broadly of the entire area rather than being able to hone in. So that's work that obviously we haven't yet done because we haven't figured out where the growth is going to be.
Joe.
I think if I'm right in thinking that it does look at sub-areas, so it splits up South Warwickshire into sub-areas and looks at the supply and demand, I think, in those sub-areas, which obviously then links to the emerging growth strategy that we're working on. So there is a lot of cross working between the emerging growth locations and the strategy. And the kind of sub-area kind of supply and demand approach that Jack's been working on through the playing pitch strategy. But Jack might want to add a bit more on that.
I was just going to bring Jack in, Joe, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Both Lydia and Joe are spot on. We did look at 3 different scenarios regarding housing. So the first scenario in both Warwick and Stratford strategies was the impact of local housing need delivery. So the government identified levels of housing growth for each area, and we looked at the impact of that. Because that has not been kind of designated to specific areas, that looked at the whole of Warwick and the whole of Stratford, kind of as a whole. Sorry. The second scenario we looked at was the impact of housing developments identified in the housing trajectory. So where possible, that has been split into sub areas, like Joe said. So although it's not specific sites, it might be that we know that we know the area of each district where that housing development is going to be delivered. And then the other scenarios that we looked at were for the impact of specific housing developments. And on the larger scale, so we looked at the impact of development up at Lighthorn, at Longmarston Airfield, Stratford Canal Quarter in Stratford, and we looked at the impact of Kings Hill in Warwick. So we have looked at specific sites. We've looked at the impact of development in specific sub-areas, and we've looked at the impact of large-scale housing development across both districts.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. A follow-up, Mike? Yep.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. So does that mean that the strategy is an ongoing document and can't be finalised until the South Warwickshire local plan is finalised, at least as far as the new settlements and strategic growth sites are concerned?
I'll come in there if that's okay. The strategy, as Lydia said at the start, that it's a 5-stage strategy, and where we're up to and where our involvement kind of ceases is at stage D. So we have made our recommendations. We've done the supply and demand analysis. Stage E, as Lydia alluded to before, is an ongoing process, and it's the responsibility of council, it's the responsibility of national governing bodies and Sport England to ensure that this is kept up to date with any if there's changes in the supply, if there's changes in the demand, and also where additional information is then provided, such as location of specific housing development.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Jack. Yeah, I've got a few points in covering a couple of areas. I think it's important that we help current sports providers improve their resilience in terms of, particularly around the climate, because during the winter when I used to play football and rugby and whatever, I hoped the weather wasn't too bad, because if it was too wet we wouldn't be able to play because the pitch is flooded obviously. But if it was dry and it was cold, we used to have an issue with frosty pitches, so again you couldn't play. So whether we can use the strategy, the 3G pitches and 5G pitches are less susceptible to frost and flooding issues. So I think there are issues there where are some facilities in areas that do need protection, and I think it was mentioned at the climate change panel that there could be some funding towards sports organisations to make them more resilient and sustainable and to cope with the potential climate change. So I think that's one thing. I think we need to make sure whatever we propose, there's some form of resilience built into them. I think the other thing for the local plan is to do with conflict. I think that covers in the 3 areas. Will there be some conflict between land wanting to be used for sports areas and potentially to be used for development area? Will there be some, because potentially one area could be really good for a sports pitch, but then it's earmarked for development, and the land that gets used as a sports pitch probably isn't as ideal for that provision. So I think there's some conflict there. We've spoken about conflict of successful organisations such as Stratford and other areas. So we need to make sure whatever we do in the plan sorts out that conflict. And then with other playing pitches and open areas, then there's potential for other forms of conflict, ASB as well, which again, sometimes if you do live near sports pitches, open areas, we do, I get neighbours complaining about issues of that. So I think that's got to be taken into it, some form of conflict. I do think, again, the playing pitch strategy has got to be sustainable and future-proof. Obviously, with the change in the population, I'm heartened to see lots of things have been taken into account, including population growth, areas of development, etc. But again, I'd be interested to see how this works in action in assisting securing external funding, informing the ongoing maintenance, because that's part of the recommendation, and obviously in the infrastructure delivery plan about levying and spending developer contributions. Again, I think we need to have some clarity around that. I think that would be good to see what our priorities are. So I think that's quite important. And again, I think we've got to get this playing pitch strategy right for several reasons. One, for the health of our community, because we all know open spaces, sport, pitches, etc., to help to contribute to the mental health and well-being of our residents. We're also trying to encourage people to take more exercise, which again is potentially beneficial for our residents. And it also, as well, you know, we have these sports clubs, they do a lot for community cohesion. They're not only just for sporting, but they are some of the pillars in the communities that do a good job. You know, those facilities suddenly become available for other organisations as well. You know, and people have events there. They do Cubs, Beavers, Rainbows, and voluntary organisations use those facilities as well. So, again, it's important that one, we've got our playing strategy, but two, the facilities that we provide then can have some additional community use as well. So I'm sure you've all taken that into account, and I do apologise if I've slightly rambled on, but I think there's some quite important points that I'd like some reassurance on, really. Thank you. Jack, do you want to come in on any of those first? I'll give you first. You can open the ins on this one to use in the sporting analogy, and Lydia and Joe can come in at number 2 and number 3.
Okay.
Yes, I'll bring you in. Sorry, I got distracted. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So regarding your point about the climate, and 3G pitch provision, the vast majority of football clubs specifically require and desire access to 3G pitches, and financially it would be impossible to meet the demand or the desire from all football clubs. What the playing pitch strategy does do is spell out the FA use a ratio of 38 teams to 1 3G pitch, and theoretically that should cover all teams' training demand. So where grass pitches aren't floodlit, they're impossible to be used for training during the winter. So all training should be catered for on a 3G pitch or floodlit sand dressed pitch. In terms of meeting match play demand from all clubs, the PPS does explore a scenario that was requested by the FA and the Football Foundation about the level of new 3G development that would be required to meet all match play demand from all community clubs, and it would be completely unsustainable to do that. What the PPS does do, though, is highlight where there is poor quality provision that isn't suitable to hold much match play at all, and maybe teams from those who are utilising those pitches would have priority in accessing 3G pitch provision. So that would be my response to climate and how the PPS kind of addresses that. You will find, however, that rugby clubs, for example, there is a split between who wants to use artificial provision and who wants to use grass pitch provision. Rugby clubs tend to have their own sites and own their own sites, and having to go off-site to access artificial provision means that they can't generate much revenue on match days or through training. So there is a kind of a split in demand there, but from football especially, there is a big demand. In terms of maintenance of current sites, I think this was one of your points. Again, the PPS kind of highlights where there is poor quality pitch provision, and all sports, cricket, rugby, football especially, use a pitch power assessments now, which provide in-depth technical assessments of playing surfaces and make recommendations to how they should best be maintained and upkept. Based on those, all NGBs may provide some kind of funding to ensure that maintenance is adequate, but that is highlighted through the PPS and then kind of filters through the NGB's own priority list. And then conflict was another point about I can't make recommendations about where on new sites playing pitches go and where housing is developed. However, what I can say is that Sport England would object to the loss of any grass playing field or artificial playing field for housing development. So it would be a major objection from Sport England if playing fields were to be lost for housing development, and that would not. We would not recommend that at any stage in this PPS.
Yeah, so I think my point on that one was that if there was an area of land available for both housing and sports provision, new sports provision, yeah, sometimes there's a conflict who would have that land, who would take priority. So again, I think that conflict would probably need to be addressed, because potentially the land that gets used for the sports options, plan provision option, might not be as suitable as the land that gets used for housing, in terms of topography, the type of clay it is, etc., etc. So that was just that one thought as well on that one.
Okay. I do apologise, Councillor. Could you remind me of your other points, and then I can come back to them?
I think some of them were general ones anyway. Again, it was sustainable and future-proofing, which I think it has. Obviously, the benefits to the health of the community. We need to get this right in terms of plan provision. Yeah, I was just, it's just about points about how we ensured that we could levy and spend developer contributions, how this will help it. So I assume it would provide in some form of evidence base that you've got your priority, that any developer contributions would be spent in this order, or it would be recommended would be spent in that order. But again, it's helping to secure external funding, how this would help it.
So yes, so on the developer contributions, the scenarios that we've explored would break down the impact of any level of housing development, and the impact that would have on specific sports. So if we take Kings Hill in Warwick, for example, we're able to see exactly what would need to be delivered to mitigate against that population growth because of that housing development. So Kings Hill, for example, there is potentially 4,000 new homes being developed, creating a population of 8,520 people. We know that would generate the demand for around 18 hours on a 3G pitch, which, using that 1:38 model that the FA use, that's about half a 3G pitch. So either you develop full and it can be catered for, it can cater for the population of that housing development and also existing community clubs, or you build a kind of a smaller 3G pitch. So there are recommendations there regarding specific sports for specific housing developments, and as I said earlier, for the larger levels of growth across the districts and across individual sub areas.
Was that half-time whistle, or was that Councillor Fradger, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You seem to have done the summary before you actually had all the comments from the councillors, but I just wanted to raise a point. Go back to
there were questions, Councillor Fradger, as well. I wasn't summarising. I don't think I summarised what other people were saying. I think there were questions in my own right, I'm afraid.
It just felt like a summary to me. Sorry. I just wanted to pursue a rather vague point that was made about designing pitches. We know the existing problems with pitches with traffic and people arriving there. It does cause a lot of concern to residents. If we are going to be producing new pitches in new populations, can we have a much more specific high-level recommendation that parking and access to that site is actually considered? You seem to be a little bit vague on that it wasn't really possible to do that. I'd like a bit more assurance in that area.
Yeah, Jay, do you want to come back on that one then, please? I thought we had sort of touched on this anyway.
Yeah, so for new development, for provision of new provision through the South Warwickshire local plan and the new development, whether that's a new settlement or a strategic...
Could you just get your microphone a little bit
Sorry,
closer,
yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, yeah. So through the South Warwickshire local plan, obviously we're looking at potential new settlement locations or strategic growth locations. And as part of that, we are producing some concept master plans that will look at how that development could look, including obviously not just the housing and employment, also the community uses, open space uses, etc. So it will look, and picking up the point that Councillor Crump made about the antisocial behaviour, obviously the design and the location of these facilities is critical to kind of try and minimise the risk of that in the future, but also So the idea is that each of the new growth locations will have a policy in the new local plan that will set out what the infrastructure requirements are for that new development. And obviously, if there's a new sports provision, that would probably, look at identify potentially any ancillary development, whether it would need its own parking, etc., etc. Obviously, I don't, we haven't decided yet how much detail the level of detail that we go into, but obviously, we understand that obviously if there's a new football pitch being provided, it's going to need some ancillary infrastructure to go with it. So yeah, that is certainly on our radar to kind of to look at that ancillary infrastructure.
May I just say, I very much urge that thinking to take place and make it very obvious to people reading the recommendations that this is being considered, because as councillors we take a huge amount of complaints from residents. There are schools which have issues, but actually sporting, particularly on match days, have very, very grave issues. Okay, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And we're going into injury time on this one. So, Councillor Alcock, I'll let you have the final point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Chair, beg your pardon. This, I think, is an excellent piece of work. I really, really do. I don't think it's ever been done before, just looking at pitches around the district, so I think it's excellent. As Councillor Rice said about being a working document, it's great having pitches, football, rugby, etc., that are part of larger clubs. I'd like to see it expanded into more community-based as well. Sometimes you don't need an entire basketball court for people to play basketball. A hoop, a net and a small paved area is enough for children in community areas to be able to start playing, and there's no charge. So I think it's also really important we look at the facilities that are accessible for residents on low incomes, because not everyone can afford fees to go and play at various clubs, and they charge because they have running costs. So I think it's important that we also take into account that community green areas and what could be made into a pitch. To be fair, a football pitch can be 4 jumpers down on either side of a field, and you've got a football pitch. So that's where I'd like to see this sort of developing into as well. But yeah, I think recommended definitely. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think you've just raised a good point there, Councillor Alcock, that about accessibility, and I think it's accessibility for people of all abilities as well in terms of accessing them. So whatever we can maximise to encourage people to take part in some form of exercise or social cohesion, I think it's good. I think we've got quite a few clear points that we can ask for you to take into account as part of this thing, or for the South Warwickshire local plan to note our views, particularly around about conflict, resilience, sustainability, health of community principles, and doesn't have to necessarily be or singing or dancing pitch to ensure people participate. So we can encourage as much participation as possible, particularly when there's any costs involved as well to the people, because that is one barrier. Councillor Growcock, if you want to come forward to add on, I'll let you have this because I think this is your portfolio, isn't it? If just Howard needs his special.
Thank you for letting me come forward. Just really as a response to Councillor Alcock's questions about the community and accessibility, I mean, please just to acknowledge that the playing pitch strategy was taken into considering the active community strategy, which was produced by my portfolio last year. And this is very much reducing, making sure that people that can't necessarily get to sports centres and areas around Stratford where they do have an awful lot of provision of sporting facilities already, like Stratford Town, where we have tennis clubs, football clubs, rugby clubs, So, is the provision going forward to make sure that in these new developments there is accessibility for people who wouldn't necessarily want to join a sort of competitive football club, but will just want to remain active and to have that interaction of sporting out in the fresh air. So just a very small point, if you don't mind me thanking.
No, I think I was getting at some more point. We need to make sure our strategies are tied up and inform South Warwickshire plan as much as possible, and encourage, don't put any barriers to any access to events and facilities, and also that they don't have to be competitive. They need to be just something for people to enjoy. So I think that's an added extra point as well. So thank you for that. I'm proposing we'll bring this to an end, this item, if members are happy. And thank you for your input on that, Jack, Lydia and Joe. The next one we'll be going on to now is the notice of motion, the private management companies. Mr. Buckland, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I kick off, following on from
that. Way up using the football analogy, there we are.
Sorry, I won't stretch that
analogy.
Okay, so there was a notice of motion proposed at the meeting of Council on the 14th of April, proposed by Councillor Pemberton, seconded by Councillor Junid, and it's surrounding the issues of private management companies operating places like public open space, flood alleviation schemes and estate roads. The notice of motion was referred to the Cabinet, and it's coming back to the Cabinet on the 7th of July, but you will all then get an opportunity to consider the Cabinet recommendation when it comes back to Council on the 14th of July. So this is coming back to Council, it's going to the Cabinet in the first instance. Just for brevity, the notice of motion suggested establishing a task and finish group, that had membership from the OSC but wasn't restricted to the OSC. It covered a number of particular points that it suggested the OSC should get in, or the group should investigate to help understand the issues affecting the residents within Stratford, to be used pretty much as a lobbying tool with central government. And the report, section 122, talks about, when planning for new estates, obviously the council wants public open space, it wants estate roads, etc. That's a planning issue, definitely. Who owns that company, who owns that land, isn't really a planning issue. And I know we've now made some changes to our planning policies, but we have a number of estates which have been granted, and there's private management companies in place. What this effectively is suggesting is a fact-finding type of exercise to understand the impacts on our residents, for then to be used, and it's summarised at 127, to try and move this debate on at a political level. So long and the short of it is that the proposal going to the Cabinet would be to endorse the notice of motion that came forward with some changes, but fundamentally, yes, to establish a task and finish group, do some fact-finding to then be used in the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Buckland. That sounds sensible. Councillor Alcott, please.
Thank you. Sorry, can I just clarify that the task and finish group will only be made up of members from Overview and Scrutiny Committee? I just feel that we could be restricting ourselves by not utilising the expertise of other members of the council. And I think that's something that is really important when it comes to this sort of task and finish group.
Okay. Look, again, apologies. The Chair mentioned at the beginning that the papers weren't distributed, and I apologise for that, and I'm sorry about not covering it explicitly in my introduction just now. Paragraph 133 within the report, and I know you haven't had the chance to look at that, so I once more, apologies that the printer broke and we couldn't get the papers out. But the recommendation says, whilst a subgroup of the OSC, given the issue, it's recommended that membership of this group should be taken from the wider council membership, reflecting political balance requirements. The Constitution does allow for that. So yeah, that particular point is addressed within the report, which will go for the first instance to the Cabinet and then on to Council.
Councillor Keithley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a point of clarification, really, and perhaps, David, you could help. Is the intention I'm reading page 164. It says, collate a central record of all sites where a private management company is operating. Is it the intention to include all these little parcels of grass and stuff on developments, of which there are many, hundreds, if not more, across the district, or are we really focusing our efforts on public open space? I think that's an important point of clarification, because this document has set out or proposing a requirement that the Task and Finish group report back in 3 months. Well, I can tell you, in my personal opinion, looking at my own ward, there would be an awful lot to collate if it included all sites.
Again, I can clarify that point. So the original notice of motion is shown on page 164, and it does have that as the first bullet point. The response, though, isn't to do that piece of work. I think it would be impractical, and you'd be chasing your tail forever. So what the proposed remit of the Task and Finish group is at the page on 166, and there's 7 bullet points there. It doesn't talk about establishing that register of companies across the area, many of which there aren't any issues with, to be fair, but given that and look, a lot of what we can do couldn't be retrospective. The management companies are in place in any case. This is to try and help progress the debate at a national level, to try and understand the issues affecting our residents, to then feed that on. So engaging with and taking evidence from established residents groups, etc., from the developments effective, so from fact finding, rather than putting a register together.
Yeah, thank you, David. Sorry, Chair, just to clarify then, so you just read to me off page 166. Is that right? Is that what you were saying? This is the proposal. So under 6, it says to collate a central record of all sites where a private management company is operating. Is that what the intention is?
It looks like it. Sorry.
Well, I think you just actually said you disagreed with that. You said that you'd be chasing your tail forever, because I know in my own ward there are countless problems that have been left behind by developers and small management companies that are difficult to track down.
Ahead of the discussions on Monday, I thought that particular element had been dropped from the proposal because it would be impractical.
I think it needs clarifying then, doesn't it? Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Wyle-Huggins, please.
Thank you. If we go back to page 164, it says that the remit of the group should include establishing the position of the county council in relation to adoption of assets. Now, if we were to expand that a little bit more, because we all know with devolution, what is going to exist really. I do think there's some devolution implications for this work, and I think they're important, because what I'm hearing about in other counties are a little bit further ahead than we are with the devolution processes, that parish councils are now being approached to adopt sites, etc. And I do think that it's important that devolution and the implications of that to these sites is really properly thought about, because there are some major implications, because we don't yet know what central government are going to say about some of these sites, particularly the community assets that we were just talking about previously. So I do think that is I do think that's quite an important point that we need to make. In 2 years' time, we simply don't know what's going to be happening, do we? So I think we need to make it wider and to really drill down as to what the implications are for parish councils as well. Because what I hear is they're expected to pick up a lot more slack than they currently do. Thank you.
To be fair, whether parish councils, town parish councils pick up more following local government reorganisation, that doesn't seem to be consistent with the feedback that was issued nationally on the 3rd of June. It appears that neighbourhood involvement, neighbourhood engagement, the government would see would be undertaken by the successor authorities through things like neighbourhood committees. Now, historically, Stratford-on-Avon had 4 such committees: Dasset, Avon, Stour, and Stratford, I think, was the other one of the 4 that we had back in the day. At the parish forum last week, when this issue was raised, I did respond that I don't actually see the majority of the town and parish councils picking up significant amount of extra responsibilities. I think there could be an exception for Stratford-upon-Avon, because in 1974, when reorganisation happened then, a lot of the public open space in the town of Stratford-upon-Avon came to the district council and not to the town council. That could be one area where there could be some significant changes, but in some of our smaller parishes, I don't actually think, given that government were almost cautioning against establishing new town and parish councils where they don't exist at the moment, as potentially being seen as another burden for taxpayers, that there would be significant additional responsibilities being passed to town and parish councils. But as I say, I think there may be an exception for Stratford.
Councillor Passingham, please.
Yeah, I'm finding this a massive problem in my ward, in that I've got 6 new estates, and each one has got a separate private management company, and on each one of the estates there's also social housing, so I'm having to deal with social housing providers as well, who then dealing with the private management estate. And quite often there's, because the estates haven't been finished off properly by the developers, then there's the developers to deal with as well. And as I understand it, this problem's been going on for 20 years. In 2005, this system of allowing developers to appoint private management companies first started, and there's at least 30 estates with issues around S106 and completions of S106 and management companies. So it's going to be a big task to get it sorted in 3 months, and I'm aware that there's a new enforcement S106 officer who's got a massive backlog of things to go through. There's also a new compliance officer, and hopefully we'll get a lot of help from them in trying to sort this out and finding a way forward. But to leave the situation as it is, I think would be a mistake, because we've got 2 standards of resident now, because one lot of residents are paying their council tax, and their council tax is paying for their public open spaces, and another lot, which is now thousands of residents, are having to pay on top of that a service charge, a management ground maintenance charge, for a public open space that everybody else can use. And it is causing sort of conflict between residents and communities at the moment.
It's this kind of issue that the Task and Finish group will absolutely explore. And I don't think we could have that debate now. There will be a limit, ultimately, under current legislation as well, about what could be done about estates that exist, as you've described. I will come back specifically on that register point. That's wrong-footed me slightly, because I didn't think we were progressing that particular point. But gathering the evidence, which could then inform national debate.
Yeah. But my point more was that it's a big issue, and we need a lot of officer help, I think, to understand the problems there are and what can be done.
Councillor Keithy, then I'll come in.
Okay. It's just in response to what you just said there, David, about gathering evidence to inform national debate on this issue of management companies and the fact that they are sort of out of control in many places. Or there is a very difficult for people living on estates to set up right to manage companies and take over little areas of space and what have you. So I think we all agree that there's a need for better legislation around this area. But you've just said informing the debate. Are other local authorities undertaking similar sort of exercises? What I see and what I'm fearful of, David, is is that this. It's all right. So I'm looking at both of you at the same time. But yeah, I'll speak through the chair. No, I'll speak through the chair. Sorry, chair. What I'm fearful of is it's actually a really big piece of work. And I think that the scope of this and the terms of reference for this group need to be very, very closely defined, because otherwise you're going to get scope creep, and this thing is going to be massive, and there's absolutely no way you're going to report on it in 3 months. I'm fearful of that. It's a lot of work for our officers that are involved, and the small group of probably members that join this group. It raises concerns. I don't think it's properly scoped,
I think,
in my view.
I couldn't agree more, Councillor Keith, and I think you've been reading my notes. I don't know if you can read my writing, but you said a lot of things. I was telling the 3 months is extremely optimistic, and it'd be quite interesting if we went back to Cabinet and said, "Oh, we want something back within 3 months on the complex area." I wonder what that response would be. So I do definitely agree. I think 3 months is extremely optimistic. I think we'd be struggling to do it in 6, personally. Looking at the wide remit, I agree the point about collating the central record of all sites. Well, how long is that? And I think that needs some clarification. I do think we need some terms of reference about this, clearer ones. Yeah, I fully support your points that you made just then, Councillor Keith, and if you want to make that as a proposal as well, or feedback to Cabinet, I'm more than happy to second that as well.
Yeah, I think it needs a better, a clearer defined scope of work is what I would make a suggestion of, because I think at the moment, my personal view is it's a little bit too vague, and it's bigger than you think. You're going into some very big rabbit holes.
That's right. And I know that there's talk about the makeup of the group. I assume that group wouldn't include any Cabinet members because it's coming to oversee. But we've already established a particularly challenging task and finish group that we have on housing that takes people's time. And perhaps it's one of the reasons why we can extend it to other members, other councillors. But there will still be officer time to support these task and finish groups. And that's one thing we have to take into account. Particularly, we want officers who know how task and finish groups work and support it in the way that Howard does. Yeah, there we are, Howard. Quick compliment there. So I think that is important about officer time on this as well, involved in that. So I'll bring Councillor Rice back in because he indicated first, then I'll bring you back in, Stuart. Yeah, is that all right? Or do you want to do this bit because that...
No, I was just going to say, let others speak, because you and I have been having the conversation, so let's hear from others, is what I was going to say.
Yep. Councillor Rice, please.
I completely agree with what both of you have just said. However, trying to look at it from the point of view of residents, is there a danger if the timescale is pushed out too far? It looks like we're kicking it into the long grass. Should there be some kind of interim report, potentially, on a reduced scope, and then a further final report, perhaps after another 6 months or a year or whatever the period should be, which is more comprehensive? I just feel that there's a danger if residents are already incredibly irritated by this, that we're seen to be taking an awful long time to respond.
Yeah, I'll just do the counter argument to that, because one, residents have been waiting for a little while on this. I'm sure they'd rather us get it right first time and then do something rather than produce a rush report because they've been waiting a while. So I always work on the get it right first time. I think that point about an interim report or progress report is a fair point. So we could say we would guarantee, we would commit, that was the word, commit to giving an interim report within 3 months, but a full and final comprehensive report is likely to take longer, which I don't think would be unreasonable. Councillor Keith, anything to add to that?
Chair, thanks. It is quite close to my heart. I think this is a really important piece of work, okay? And it just so happens I've got a major problem in my ward with a very, very big area of public open space managed by a management company that's been poorly looked after, relatively poorly looked after, but be careful what I say. Yeah. But as residents perceive it, not well looked after. And now we've got an issue of trying to decide how how to improve it and how to take it over, and there's no money to come with it. So it's a massive liability for somebody. And frankly, you know, where I live, people will be saying, well, why am I giving my taxpayers' money to SDT to support a load of open space that's benefiting people that live, you know, 10 miles away? It's a bit like Councillor Passingham's point. There's loads of problems at Shipston. You know, should the local authority step in and maintain that at its cost, which is actually my cost as a taxpayer, but I'm not going to use the facilities in Shipston. So it's a big issue. It's a huge issue to wrangle with, and I think that if we're going to start off trying to identify what some of these, you want some evidence to support sort of the lobbying of national legislation on this, then we need to keep it tight so it can be delivered. It can be delivered, and we know exactly what it is we're looking at. At the moment, I just think the scope of this is a bit too broad. I think it would benefit from being narrowed.
Councillor Fradgley, please.
Thank you, Chair. I really do support this motion going through. I do think it needs more time. It's something that came up actually at the Town Council at a meeting recently, and we were going to approach the district to talk about where we should be going with developers sort of requesting all kinds of things. So I really support this and look forward to it actually happening. It's very timely.
Well, as I say, it's on the Cabinet agenda for the 7th. You're making some views that you'll report back into that meeting. I will clarify that point in relation to the central record, because I'm not sure how useful that will be. It's more some examples where things have gone wrong that might be helpful in trying to raise this issue nationally. So, yeah, the 3 months, there was reference within the original notice of motion of reporting back within 3 months. That's why I believe that's been repeated here. Or whether you make the recommendation to the Cabinet that you have an interim report after 3 months, that's something that's within your gift.
Yeah, I'm saying if I make a proposal then that we are supportive of the notice of motion, we think it needs to be done. We would like the terms of reference to be clarified so it doesn't suddenly expand. We feel the 3 months for a full report is unlikely to be achieved, but we feel the task and finish could potentially do an interim report within the 3 months timescale, and then report back, as it says, to update full council on recommendations at the conclusion of this work. I feel it's right, we need to spend the proper time on this so it's not rushed, and so our residents are appreciating that we are taking this seriously, because just looking through those items there are potentially significant amounts of work to do this. So I think we would like some more feedback on the terms of residents, but also we've got to be realistic about the timescale of the scheme, and also potentially about the makeup of the task and finish committee as well. Are we happy with that? Councillor Keithley? Yeah? Come on, I can see. I'd rather hear it now, Rodney. If you want to just add something on, I don't mind.
Well, I think it's not, this piece of work is not just about informing national legislation, although we do need to change national legislation to be able to resolve some of these issues. Frankly, they're outside of our capability. They're outside of what we're able to do. So you do need to do that. And the point I was just going to make, given that some of these things feed into the local plan, development of the local plan, I wonder whether or not it's something that we need to be talking to some other neighbouring local authorities about.
Yeah, and again, identify good practice with the local authorities and see what they've done, because they might have innovative ideas that we could take on board. But yeah, I think we've got to concentrate on areas what we can make a significant influence, as opposed to where we're limited of what we can do, and make residents aware what our position is. So yeah, brilliant. So I think we're all right on that one. Are we okay? Howard, are you all right for something we can report back to Cabinet on Monday? Yeah, brilliant. Like I say, I think this is an ongoing one. Yes, we need to establish it as soon as possible, but we need to get this right as before we start it, and it can be refined as we go along as well. I think that's the other thing, is we won't have things set in stone. Thank you on that one. Right, thank you, Joe. I was going to say thank you for Lydia, and Jack now he's gone as well, so thank you for coming. The next item. Do you want?
Yeah, if I can kick off on local government reorganisation.
Yeah.
So all councillors will be aware that in December the English Devolution Deal White Paper was published. Government seeking to devolve powers from Westminster to strategic authorities circa 1.5 million populations with an elected mayor in place, and those strategic authorities to be made up, underpinned by unitary authorities and not the existing two-tier system. On the 5th of December, 5th of February, pardon me, all councils in two-tier areas received a letter from the Minister formally starting the invitation to submit proposals for local government reorganisation in our area. And what that means for Stratford is that, yes, we received a letter and we have until the 28th of November this year to respond to that letter, setting out what we believe should be the future arrangements for local government within not just Stratford, but the whole of the county of Warwickshire. We've got to be clear about what we think would be the most preferable solution for the whole of Warwickshire. Ahead of the submission date on the 28th of November, all councils were required, or requested at least, to submit an interim plan. The interim plan identified where we believe we may end up by way of a strategic authority, but also what forms of local government might be possible in the future. There were 3 options for strategic authorities that were identified in that interim plan, one of which was a membership of the West Midlands Combined Authority. You'll see within the pack of papers we have got now that a letter has been sent by the then leader of Warwickshire County Council, along with the leaders of all the district and boroughs, to the Mayor of the West Midlands Combined Authority, to which the Mayor has responded to say he does not see that the boundaries of the West Midlands Combined Authority would be extended. From that perspective, that removes, therefore, the joining of the West Midlands Combined Authority as an option, at least ahead of the mayoral elections in 2028. The other 2 options for strategic authority were identified as potentially what was been adopted in Cumbria, in that the county of Warwickshire becomes a strategic authority in its own right. Nowhere near the 1.5 million populations, but I think we've previously debated about how Warwickshire wraps around areas like Coventry and Solihull, the historic heart of the county of Warwickshire. It doesn't seem, well, it's clear actually that Coventry and Solihull will continue to be members of the West Midlands Combined Authority, and that option wouldn't be available to us. So you could have a standalone Warwickshire Strategic Authority, or you would then look at other county council areas. For ourselves, you may consider areas such as Worcestershire, Gloucestershire, Oxfordshire as a possibility, but also the county of Warwickshire neighbours, Staffordshire, Leicestershire, Northamptonshire. Those could all be the areas which are explored for future strategic authorities. I will say the Leicestershires and Staffordshires have little in common with areas within Stratford, but likewise areas in say Wychhaven and Worcestershire have little in common with places in the north of the county such as Atherstone. So they were the 2 options that effectively remain in relation to strategic authority. The form, though, a local government that supports that has to be, they come as a pair, effectively. So if you had a standalone strategic Warwickshire authority, that would have to be underpinned by at least 2 unitary authorities. You cannot have a one-to-one relationship at that point. The options which have been identified for former local government is a single unitary Warwickshire and a 2 unitary, and the 2 unitary based on Nuneaton, North Warwickshire and Rugby in the north, and Stratford and Warwick in the south. Now, the district and boroughs signed off a joint interim plan in March. We went to the Cabinet and Council here in March. That was agreed by all the district and boroughs. The County Council also approved an interim plan that also identified those as the 2 options available for local government reorganisation. None of the district and boroughs at that point identified a preference. It just identified that these two options were available. The county council did identify a preference, and the preference at the county council, at least at that stage before the elections, was for a single unitary Warwickshire. As part of the preparations for the final submission, the council is required to undertake and that engagement was specified within that original letter from government. To help inform that process, council and cabinet are being now asked to identify, of the two options for local government reorganisation, what is its preference. Now, that isn't a final decision by council. The final decision will still be made at the extraordinary meeting of the council, which has been scheduled for the 17th of November. At that meeting, further research will have been undertaken, especially in areas, and that's referred to within the report, surrounding some of the county council functions, areas that the district councils haven't got experience in, things like adult social care, SEND, children's services. We will need to explore all of those areas before finalising proposals. An initial evaluation has been undertaken by Deloitte, that is in the paper, and it identifies each of the 6 criteria and identifies a forced ranking for each of those. It concludes that, in its opinion, that the 2 unitary solution would be preferable for Warwickshire. What we have not had confirmed to us is the weighting that government will be using against those 6 criteria. The one area where the preference is for the single unitary Warwickshire does surround cost, effectively the kind of efficiency gains that could be achieved from unitary government. I know we're not going to have the debate about local government reorganisation now. This will be, as I say, going to the Cabinet on the 7th and go to the Council on the 14th. Very happy, though, to take any questions about, well, clarifying what's being asked of Cabinet and Council at this time.
Holly Hoggins, then Councillor Alcock. Shout if I don't do it next time.
Yes, can you, I don't know if in this document, can you direct me to where the efficiency gains are? Have we actually got any of those in this document before us? Can you direct me to where those are, please?
Yeah, and Chair, look, this is a consequence, and again, I'm sorry of the late setting out of the papers. They're summarised within the appendix, which has got the interim plan, but there is more detail within the paper. Oh, God, and it's the Deloitte report itself. Oh, on pages 91 onwards of the appendix to the cabinet report. So if you've got the cabinet papers, you've got identification there of the financial position, and then later on pages 39, or sorry, 97 of the cabinet papers themselves, an assessment, and it's identified that these are high-level financial insights. We would still need to undertake further work in order to get better estimates on these areas. What Deloitte have used is industry standards that they've experienced elsewhere. This is benchmarking type information. We have a positive relationship in place with the County Council about the sharing of information. So the districts and boroughs and the county have all agreed that information will be shared to help inform final submissions. We would need to receive further information to help us with that process. But yeah, on pages 97 of the Deloitte report.
Yeah, so I've got those in front of me. So can you tell me then, with regard to the costs and savings, over what period of time is that, and should we be looking at how those costs kind of develop over a 5-year period or a 10-year period, or the savings over that length of time? And then you get, because initially there's a lot more costs involved, isn't there? Like doing the IT sort of stuff. I'm sorry, this is a mighty term to get sort of with 24 hours notice, but what is, you know, it's projected costs and projected savings that we should be looking at. And I think if I was central government, that's what I'd be wanting to look at.
Okay, Chair, in response, the report that we've got, the Deloitte report, is the same Deloitte report that was discussed and presented at the meeting of the devolution deal and local government reorganisation working group. So that has been available for some time, and the figures haven't changed from there. What has been identified is that the single unitary model Deloitte are suggesting would cost in the order of £12 million to implement. For the two unitary model, Deloitte are suggesting £17 million. Now, that level of cost is consistent with what we've seen in Cumbria, where each of the Cumbrian authorities were required to contribute £2 million, along with that then being match funded by the county council. So it's in that kind of order. I will say that the savings, the assumed savings, are higher under the single unitary Warwickshire at 20.3 million, and these are recurring annual savings when fully implemented of 17.8 million for the two unitary solution. That isn't massively different to the figures that the county council were suggesting, other than the county council have also then added, and this is from the receipt of a PricewaterhouseCoopers report that was commissioned. It wasn't commissioned, it was provided to the county council network free of charge by the PwC, and then repeated for each of the 21 county council areas. Deloitte's report is the PwC report is suggesting a further cost of £10 million a year recurring from the two unitary solution, and that's from the desegregation of county services. That's what we need further information of before council makes its final decision in November. All that council's being asked for at this point, though, is a preference of the two. There will be an opportunity to come back to that point.
Brilliant. I've got Councillor Alcott next, and then Councillor Johnston. And if anybody else wants to indicate, please do know, and I'll put you on the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to confirm that we have a working party already going through this in depth. Where do they report to? Do they report to Cabinet, or do they report to full council? Or do they report to... help me out.
So the working party is more of a briefing opportunity for members of the Cabinet, members of the opposition. So it's got all the independent members, as well as the Green Party, the Conservatives, and obviously the Lib Dems. Views aren't being sought from that group as to what the proposals are. It's an understanding of where we are. It's more of a briefing opportunity for elected members rather than seeking a view to inform this process.
Yes, please. I'm just trying to get it straight in my head. It's been brought to OSC Scrutiny today to scrutinise this report, or are we looking this for information purposes only, ready to debate at full council? I'm just trying to ascertain exactly what's expected in this in this committee at this moment.
So this report is going to the Cabinet. There is no recommendation at the moment as to which of the two options Cabinet suggests. That will be up to the Cabinet to identify and recommend to Council. And you will all be sat in here on the 14th of July to debate what you believe is the right solution, the preference for Stratford. So yeah, you're not debating now, but if there's any points of clarification, any additional information you think you need to help in that process, then yes, that would be the opportunity for you to raise it now.
I've got Councillor Johnston, please.
I'm concerned with the strategic authority. This resolution is only going to be concerned with the proposed unitary authority. It does seem to me that is there any process for us considering the three options you, Mr. Buckland, mentioned? If we're going out for if we're agreeing an option for the unitary, which we're then going out for consultation on, but we're not consulting on the strategic, is what's the decision process for that? Because it feels to me that might well inform the unitary decision.
You're absolutely right. And that was part of the issue of determining the position on the West Midlands Combined Authority. If Warwickshire was to join the West Midlands Combined Authority, it could do so as a whole, or it could do as two unitaries. So it wouldn't that wouldn't really impact on that debate. But given that that option isn't available for us, it is now important to consider that under a single unitary Warwickshire, you couldn't have a single unitary strategic authority, a Warwickshire strategic authority. You could not have a single unitary Warwickshire solution. So by default, that option would fall away. The point around, and look, it isn't a resolved point yet, Councillor Johnston, about what strategic authority the area that Stratford would end up in. We know that places like Oxfordshire are already looking at effectively a Thames Valley solution. There's moving parts around, if you're looking at health boundaries, the ICB at the moment are still consulting on changes to their health boundary, and because government are requiring 50% efficiency savings of the management of the ICBs, there's looking at mergers, and Coventry and Warwickshire are in discussions with Herefordshire and Worcestershire. That could be a really important point when you're looking at future strategic authorities. But we're not asking for a view on that as yet. That we just haven't got enough information yet to determine that side of it. But one will help inform the other. If our residents are really our parishes are really supportive of a two unitary Warwickshire as opposed to a single unitary Warwickshire, that does then help inform at a later point the strategic authority question.
Councillor Johnson, I can see you're looking.
In November, will we be being asked to make some comment on the strategic authority? But we can't yet consult on it because we don't know.
Well, we've identified the options that are available for strategic authorities. We are required, when we make our proposal, to identify where we think we might end up by way of strategic authorities. I will say, and this isn't a political comment, but the feedback that we had back on the interim plans was really superficial in relation to the strategic authority questions. We posed questions about that and had no direct responses back at all. We put the question to government, would they contemplate the idea of, say, Coventry and Solihull coming from the existing West Midlands Combined Authority? No reference to that in the feedback that we had at all. I think it's a given that there won't be changes to that boundary now, and we've collectively asked the question of the Mayor, because if you're to join an existing combined authority, you do need the consent of the council that's going in, you need the consent of the Secretary of State, and you also need the consent of the Mayor. The Mayor has the right of veto, and the Mayor's been very clear on their position.
I'm coming back on a slightly different point, but much simpler. I was asked last night if we could clarify what the form of the consultation would take place, and it'd be good if we could make that detail available as soon as we can.
Chair, there's a live example of that at the moment because Surrey are consulting on their options, so we can make a reference to that. And Surrey, just for information, are consulting on a 2 unitary Surrey or a 3 unitary Surrey. They're the two options that government are consulting on at the moment. But it will be central government that formally consults. We don't want to confuse the language, so we're calling this an engagement exercise that the council would undertake.
Councillor Keithley, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just an observation on criteria 2, which is about the financial side of matters, which my gut feeling is that this is going to be quite important. It's probably going to be the thing that tips the balance at the end of the day. Page 91, the bottom, there's a little bit of preamble about the financial assessment and the draft results from the financial assessment that was undertaken and assumptions behind these calculations. So the numbers that have been provided are based on assumptions that have been made. And you go to page 97, which we were all looking at a minute ago, which is that table that shows the difference between the two options. Option 1, 20 million, ballpark. Option 2, 18 million, ballpark. We've just rounded them for the purposes of making the point that there's about 10% difference between the two. But these numbers are precise. It, I think, might help Cabinet when they're looking at this, and Council subsequently, to have some sort of sensitivity analysis on each of these costs and savings, because at the moment we've just got a single figure. And you know, in my previous experience, whenever we were assessing the viability of projects, we would apply some sort of sensitivity to these numbers, so that we would say, you know, what's the best or worst case scenario and what's the likely case scenario. I think what you're looking at is a likely case scenario, but in a worst or best case scenario, you might find there's virtually no difference at all between these numbers, and these numbers are going to be focused on at Council, because this is the basis for, really the basis for criteria 2 and deciding what the ranking is. I think there would be some benefit in fleshing that out a little bit, so that when this came for consideration, you could see whether or not, in fact, if there was some movement in these figures, what difference that might make.
And Chair, through you to respond.
Okay.
When the business, so when Council formally makes its decision in November, there will be more financial information and there will be that sensitivity analysis. This is the central case that Deloitte's are putting to us. This is, given the time that they've had available to do this exercise, what they believe a reasonable projection could be. But before you make your final decision, you will have more information on that.
Okay, well, I think that's useful to know, because this is what's going to Cabinet on Monday, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry, when I talk about council in November, you'll have a much more detailed business case then.
Right, okay. All right, thank you.
And again, no, I think that's a fair point, and I think it justifies what we've done to do with the OSC Task and Finish Group, to do with open spaces, that Mr. Buckland just said that Deloitte have had limited time to produce the report, and therefore but there will be a much more comprehensive report in an added timescale, and I think that underpins what we should be doing on the previous one, on the notice of motion, because if you're, you know, like you just said, Councillor Keithy, that sensitivity analysis, detailed, etc. The figures were rounded up and they were very, you know, sort of precise sort of thing. So I think it justifies what we're doing on that, because we do need the right information. We need to be able to challenge it, and there's no criticism of Deloitte's in this, but we as a council and they as our consultant have been given a short time scale with a bit of a vague terms of reference, and it sounds very similar to what we were talking about earlier. So if we can get rid of the vagaries, if we have enough time and we have proper, meaningful, well-sourced information, then we can make proper decisions on that. And I think you're right, Stuart, that we haven't got that totally at the moment, that we can have 100% confidence. You going to come back in? Well,
only that I might have misunderstood what's likely to happen at Council on the 14th, because I was under the impression that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, please, David, that the Council will be deciding kind of which option to go forward with for consultation. Am I wrong?
Okay. We're calling it engagement, but yeah, both options will be included in the engagement. Council has just been asked for a preference from its own perspective at this point. Post the engagement, you'll have the results of that exercise, along with much more detailed financials, a full investigation into, as I said, the points of desegregation that PricewaterhouseCoopers have identified a recurring cost of 10 million. We need to understand that issue because it is important. It's a really important point that Deloitte understand the economies of scale are greater. At the single unitary Warwickshire, that's why the savings are fundamentally higher when you have a single council delivering it. We don't understand, and that's why we need this further commission of more detailed work. And it's a company called People 2 is cited within the report, which are doing a particular piece of work on adult social care, children's services, SEN. That will follow. So when you are being asked finally to make your decision in November, you will have all that kind of information available to you to make then a more informed position. All you're being asked at this point is what is your preference?
So when we go out to this consultation exercise, what do you call it, sorry?
Engagement.
Sorry, yeah, engagement exercise. Engagement is letting people know what we're going to do rather than consulting. We're just engaging.
Yeah, so
Okay, so just a bit of semantics, but the point is that you're going to go out with these are the two options, and this is this council's preference, is what you're really saying. Okay, that's fine, and we'll get in more detail later. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on that? Points to raise? No. Thank you for that, Mr. Buckland. Next item is the Home Choice Plus review, which is on page 355 of the Cabinet Papers. I've had a couple of requests just for a 5-minute break. Would members be... but it's got to be 5 minutes. I do apologise. You've just come forward. 5 minutes, so if we could be back just after 10 to. And I'll be coming around chasing you if you haven't. welcome back everybody, thank you for that. And well, next item is Home Choice Plus review on page 355 of the Cabinet Papers. I'm pleased to announce that we've got Hannah Buckley, who's the Head of Housing, Revenue and Customer Services, pardon her, who's not long been with us, and she's still smiling, which is a good sign. Whether that's a smile or the grimace, because she's had to come and sit opposite me, so yeah, we don't know. And thank you, Hannah, and hope you'll have a long and productive stay with Stratford District Council. Thank you. If you want to fire away on this item, please. Just, you see we've got 4 recommendations and just some of the background, please.
Yep. So this report is brought because effectively a backlog has been generated because there's been a mismatch between the resourcing and the demand. So this paper effectively sets out the plans in relation to tackle the backlog, but also to review the approach so that we don't get into a position where a further backlog is created. So the recommendations are in relation to our plans to process the backlog, the plans in relation to procuring an IT system which will support us to deliver the housing register more effectively, particularly thinking about some of the criteria that we have in Stratford-on-Avon around local connection. The knock-on implication in relation to that will mean that we need to withdraw from the sub-regional partnership, and then our wider plan in relation to ensuring that we have an effective and efficient housing register, which is really critical in terms of ensuring that we've got the appropriate understanding around housing need and housing demand across the district. I'm conscious that everybody has commented on the papers being late. Do you want me to go into any more detail, or?
Members, were you happy with that? I think that did summarise it pretty well, and we've got 4 recommendations as well to look at. I think it's the other thing that obviously a lot of things in here. Obviously, there's a backlog, and some of these options will take a while to come into. I can imagine right into all existing applicants on the register. Won't be a particularly easy project. Well, it'll be time-consuming, definitely. So it would be interesting to see about the timescale about this and what the costs are likely to be, and what you think the particular challenges will be that you're facing on those. If that's okay, Hannah.
So in relation to the timeline, we're just mapping that out currently. The intention is that we will, subject to recruitment, have tackled the backlog within 6 months and to be able to manage business as usual. There's about 500 hours associated with the backlog. We are also mindful that we are likely to see some increased workload because of the activity to write out to people. We're anticipating that in response to those, there will be a number of groups. There'll be some people that write back and say, yes, I'm still living here, my housing situation is the same, so that will be relatively simple to process. There will be the no responses, which will also be relatively simple to process. But then there will be others that might write to us, and that could either be to inform us around a change of circumstances, which will generate work, but then also there might be some people which you tend to find that whenever you do any activity in relation to your housing register, that somebody will then, it will generate some complaints because people aren't happy around either their perception around their status in relation to the current policy and their banding, because housing, regardless of the situation that people find themselves in, it's really important to them. And actually one of the things that we have to do is to allocate priorities in line with the policy, because there are differing needs and therefore they need to be dealt with in order of that priority. So I would expect that there might be some people that will complain on the back of that. So it's about how we also, alongside that, deal with that additional workload. The system is a bit of a longer process depending on the procurement, whether we're able to draw down from a framework, and what that transitional plan looks like in terms of how we can port from the current system through to the other system, and whether we'll be able to do any data transfer or whether that will be as simple as starting from scratch.
Yeah, that sounds very sensible, and yeah, not unusual for changing policies and procedures and systems. Councillor Alcott, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Hannah. I was just wondering if it's going to be possible, while this whole change is going on, while this is all going to be implemented, whether it's going to be, it could be the perfect opportunity for this council to have a up-to-date and thorough data capture of exactly not just how many people are on the housing register, but what sort of home they're in need of. This is going to be useful for things like updating neighbourhood plans for housing needs. And it just seems like this could be a really good opportunity to capture that. And also that would help alongside when it comes to housing, as a housing association allocating homes, as a district council through the planning process can then say, well, actually, we don't need 5 6-bedroom houses. What we need is 12 one-bedroom apartments, or we need bungalows, or we need disability accessible. I don't know if any plans like that have gone into while this change is happening, or whether you're looking at me thinking, oh my goodness, I wish I could throw something at you right now. Thank you.
Not at all. So that is part of our thinking in relation to, we need, that was the point that I made in relation to having good data from the system that then enables us to understand what our housing needs and demands are. So at the moment, we're maintaining a really high number of applicants on the register by comparison. So within the papers, I've sort of given you the comparison between Solihull, which is a larger borough, and our register is significantly higher. It's over 2,000 applicants higher. A lot of those, we believe, are no longer in housing need. So out of the sort of 5,800 we've got on the register, over 2,000 of those have not bid in the last year. The oldest case was registered in 2015 and hasn't bid at all in the last 10 years. So that's significantly clouding our understanding of what the demand is. But one of the absolute requirements of a new system is that we can really develop that rich data and understanding that then shapes our decision making. And that will go much further than just simply, does somebody need a 1-bed or a 2-bed? It should also be able to tell us sort of the reasons that people need housing, the reasons that people are securing housing, and then that will then inform sort of policy making as well.
Brilliant. Councillor Littlewood, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've really not had a chance to go through this in much detail, neither of anybody else, so please forgive me if I'm asking a question that's in here somewhere and I've not seen it. What stood out of the page to me was in your first section of background and information and under the items covered in 1.3 to 1.5. And this seems to suggest to me that if I understand it correctly, the Abritus system is not fit for purpose any longer. It's not going to be supported, and therefore we need to be looking at an alternative platform. As apropos the last item that we discussed, which is reorganisation, what joint consultations are you taking with other authorities within what might be a single or a bi-unitary authority? Particularly in relation to the fact that we don't have any housing stock of our own, where other authorities may very well do so, and do so, in fact. Thank you.
So in relation to Abritas, there's 2 points really. The current version of the system that we are operating is unsupported. There is a new version which we could pay to upgrade to, and we will have to do an options appraisal in relation to the type of system that we want, but we don't feel, based on what we know currently, that Abritas will be the right system for us. And the reason for that is because we've got lots of Section 106 agreements that prioritise housing for individuals with a local connection to a town or a village within the district. And at the moment, that sift is having to be done manually. So the Abritas system isn't able to support that, so that we could, for example, look and say, we need somebody that's got a local connection to Bidford, and can we order the shortlist appropriately? We have to physically go through. So at the moment, the system is effectively an online filing cabinet, which isn't really what we want from our system to deliver an efficient and effective service. In relation to looking at what other systems are in use across Warwickshire in terms of the potential outcomes of either a single or two unitary councils, there isn't any consistent answer. So different systems are used across the piece, and so the work that we're doing, we will be doing with a view to effectively wanting to be best in class and being able to influence the future system that's used, because it may well be that other areas don't have those type criteria that are within the Section 106s to the degree that we do. So therefore it's important that any system would be able to deliver that.
Councillor Keithley?
Thanks. I thought you had a list of people wanting to speak.
You're
Thanks,
always top
Hannah.
on my list, Councillor Keithley.
Yeah,
Always top on
I
my
mean,
list.
I don't know much. Oh, that was really interesting, I've got to say, right? So I know that you've got to look for a new system, migrate to a new system, be best in class, so that potentially we can influence others down the line. And it will help sort out the way in which we manage this. Are these internal systems only, or is there a sort of a user interface for those on the housing list that would use this system to register and make changes to their circumstances so that they could perhaps use it on a mobile device or something like that? Is that the way this is going, so that this system that's hitherto just an internal filing cabinet online is now something that actually allows us to communicate more effectively with those residents, and that they can sort of self-support information and stuff? Is that where we're going?
Well, we'll have to test through the market engagement what's out there currently. There is a whole range of systems in relation to where people can go on and upload their information. There will always be a role for us to verify that information, because you wouldn't have a system just simply uploading a change to somebody's banding, because, for example, I could scan this paper and say, here is a letter from my doctor that says I need urgent rehousing because of medical needs. So there will always be a role for us to play, but some of the systems in the market allow that interface, and then there are other systems where effectively you've got what's called like the equivalent of a Microsoft form, or something that's generated where somebody can go online, fill in the update and provide it, and then that is created into a workflow. So there's a whole plethora of different options, and it's just about assessing what's out there and also the associated costs.
Yep.
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, and obviously we want to sort of look as far forward as possible. So if people can update information that we subsequently have to validate and stuff like you do these days online for lots of things, that's the way that's going. The other thing is, of course, you've got it's going to potentially reduce your internal workload, hopefully as well. I was surprised to hear, well, not surprised perhaps, to hear that on the register at the moment you've got people that might not even live in this area anymore. We haven't updated the information. So manually it's a huge task. So I really applaud the fact that you're moving towards something that's going to future-proof the system and make you much more efficient.
I'm definitely getting worried, Councillor Keithley, that was a similar point, that potentially with the newer system could potentially have some form of AI to reduce some manual interventions. Obviously, from the sounds of it, the current system is like a cabinet or like a list, isn't it, sort of thing. So it's can't be manipulated very well for different information. So I think that's helpful. And again, I'm not sure, you mentioned recruitment, I'm not sure how easy it is to recruit to this area. And if we become, there's a potential that we might become less reliant on manual intervention, might temper any recruitment issues as well. So I think that's just a endorsement of the policy, really. So thank you for that. Councillor Wally-Hoggins, please.
Yes, just to say that we know that this really matters, because this involves some of our most vulnerable residents. But I'm just asking is, does the scope need to be even bigger? Can we make this system even better so that we can filter out more, make it more effective for our residents, really? And so I would say, and it's not for me to say it, I don't have any say over it at all, but, you know, don't penny pinch on a system that just does this when we need a system that does A, B and C, when perhaps if we had a system that did A, B, C, D and E and F, that we should go for that if it provides better service for our residents, really. I am alarmed to think that there's 2,000 more people in Stratford on that housing list, but I hear stories that as soon as people are housed, they then go back on the housing register because it wasn't quite where they wanted to be and so forth. So does that still happen? And other people don't bother applying because they're not in Gold Plus band, and so they're still on the register, but you know, until they get that sort of, they feel that until they get that kind of status, there's no point in applying for any of the houses on the list, really. Thank you.
I think as part of the sort of the options appraisal that we'll do around the system, we will look at what is available and understand what can be delivered as well. In terms of the point that we were talking about earlier in relation to data, there are lots of people that are on housing registers, and a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today in relation to the district is not any different to we'd find in authorities across the country. There's lots of people that become disillusioned with the process, and there's things that we can think about if we've got that really good quality data that says to somebody, actually, you're the lowest priority banding. You're looking for a 5-bedroom house, you know, it's just not a realistic prospect, and start to give people some really good quality data in relation to the time people will be waiting for, as well in terms of them really understanding what their housing options are. And I think that's one of the things that the data leads, because you get lots of people that think that they will be on the register and that they will eventually get housing. And I think that once you start getting more quality data around that, people will start to understand that actually it may be unlikely for them.
So what you're saying then, Hannah, is that actually some of this work is going to be about managing expectations of those currently on the register. I think we have to be honest with our residents about chances. I know it's happening up and down the country, that people think that they're going to get something and then they're not a priority. But I do think we have to be honest, and I think we have to manage those expectations. And if that is part of the process of getting the list down, then so be it. Thank you.
Brilliant. I think that's Councillor Paston, you just sneaked in there. Well done.
Just quickly. Yeah, this is recommending that we withdraw from the sub-regional Home Choice Plus, which was with Wye, Forest and Bromsgrove, which is a bit surprising to me. But are there any implications of withdrawing from that? Was it useful, successful, that having a joint programme with them in terms of housing needs and so on?
So I think it's a historic partnership. It was created back in 2011 to make use of government funding that then funded the initial system implementation. There were 6 partners originally, 3 of those have withdrawn, and I think that the potential benefits of being part of a partnership are significantly outweighed by the fact that we've got a system that's now obsolete and presents us with security risks, and that it doesn't meet our local needs in the district in relation to that criteria around local connection. So, you know, there are always benefits to partnerships, but they're not significant in this case, and they certainly aren't current.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Yeah, that's really helpful, really positive. I've just been doing a little bit of research, and I note that you're coming back on the 4th of March 2026 to discuss Home Choice Plus policy and housing associations' letting criteria, along with Councillor Coles. I just wondered where, as part of that, you'll be able to give us an update on how this has gone, how it's going, because, you know, we were talking about 7, 8 months down the line, so hopefully that'll be good. So whether you could make a note of that for us, And when you come back on the 4th of March 2026, you'll be able to add that onto that as well, because I think it makes sense as well. So we'll see how we go. So you think we make this up as we go along, and you'll probably be right. But thank you for that, Hannah. That was really helpful and good to see you. And keep on smiling. It's nice to see smiling face. Yeah, not many people smile at my jokes, so I have to make the most of it. All those in favour of smiling jokes. Right, next item we're going to talk about is the draft revenue outturn 24-25, which is on page 279 in the Cabinet report. We have got Councillor Curtis here. Does anybody want to introduce this? Or?
Okay. My 151 officer is on annual leave today, and we haven't got the deputy. So what we have got is me. So this report, I'm not currently a 151 officer.
We've got for quality, not quantity today, Dave. That's what it is.
This is the normal outturn report that's been presented to the Cabinet on Monday. Identifies an underspend for the year of 2.2 million. We had already assumed an underspend when the budget was prepared. I think it was in the order of 1.1 million was assumed already to be an underspend for the year. The report identifies on pages 280 through to 282 the individual variances for the services. By far the most significant variance relates to the investment interest that we have received, and that effectively is 2.2 million. If you exclude the investment interest from the overall variances, it's about a £30,000 deficit on the whole of the council's activities. If there are any questions that would require investigation, we can take those away and feed back to the Cabinet for the meeting on Monday. I'm sorry, I won't be in a position to answer detailed questions.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Before I come in, I've got some questions. Any other members of the committee want to raise any issues before? Or shall I start, and then if members got some questions, then they can come in? I think, is that okay? Do you want me to come? You start. Thank you. Right, I did raise a question to do with planning and enforcement that's been sent to Councillor Coucher to do with the unfavourable position in income from large planning applications. Obviously, with the lateness of the papers, and it's probably unfair to ask Councillor Coucher to explain it now, and I believe he's given the commitment. Yeah, it's probably got, I think they were sent, because I did see a copy of them. But I don't think it's fair anyway, and I think if you give a commitment on Monday to, I think they were sent, I've seen the copy when they were sent, but obviously it's probably like the post, it's got delayed, or probably blame the extreme heat causing things to go astray. But yeah, if you could give us a commitment, Councillor Coucher, you'd be able to answer that question, that would be helpful. There's the usual one to do with off-street parking, that isn't, again, almost £250,000 unfavourable position, but bearing in mind we're talking about a £3.5 million budget off the top of my head. It's not as a big a variance as, if it was a 10,000 budget and you've got 250,000 variance, that would be concerning. So whilst this figure is quite large, I think it's, we just do need to keep a watching brief on that one. And I think we ought to also acknowledge that the £2.25 million worth of investment interest is supporting the council, giving the council flexibility to do different options. So it's important that, and again, we have to be mindful that these higher interest rates might not be always around, but I think they've been there longer than anticipated for various different reasons, and I'm trying to read between the lines then. I think they've been impacted by national government rather than anything we've done locally, and that's all I'll say on that matter. So I think that is mindful that this additional income won't always be there, but that income, again, could be used for different purposes, and make sure that money is either put in reserves for different reasons or invested to ensure we provide better services or reduce the running costs of the organisation. So investor save, that would be one of the options available for us to recommend. So members, are you happy with those comments? Before I move on to Councillor Bonnie Huggins, please.
I was just going to say that £2.2 million buys quite a lot of 3G, 4G football pitches, which we came to at the beginning of today's meeting, including the replacement costs for the football pitch at Stratford Town Football Club. Thank you.
So we could say you've put a pitch in for that money then, have you, Councillor Wallace?
I believe that's been made several times and has been met with the word no. Thank you.
So thank you for that. Any other questions? I can see people are beavering away, and obviously it was a big paper to look at. Councillor Keith, I can see you're looking to come in. I'm sure you are.
Thank you, Chair. Quick question for... It's just a point of interest for me. Page 257. Oh, well, sorry, I'm just looking down to 257, David. I thought you might, but it's just you'll probably answer it instantly when I ask you the question. So halfway down, 257, on one of the 106 items, you've got a negative balance of 87,510 against a community hub, Taylor, Wimpey, Midlands, somewhere or other. How do you end up with a negative balance on SIL for, Section 106 money? Is there a simple answer?
Not in my possession, but there may well be.
Well, okay, don't worry about it. But it was just
come
interesting.
back to
It's the only one, and it's just a bit strange. It looks like it's overspent massively, but I don't know how that could be.
Okay. Chair, through you, we'll come back to you, Stuart, but that is not the report we're talking about. Sorry.
Did you want to come in, Councillor Earthwood? Malcolm, did you indicate then? No? No? Yeah, I'm going to say I do think that I know the term position predicted in on the 10th of March, it was almost 1.5 million. And obviously there's a big improvement of 760,000. Quite a significant improvement, over 50%. Again, I know things are changeable and that. So again, if we just keep an eye on that, and if things are going wrong, or things that there are positions that Scrutiny need to be looking at, obviously we'd like to be informed about that as well, from a point of view as well. So it is positive, like I say, but like I say, this high investment interest won't necessarily always be around for there. So it is pleasing that without that, you would have been virtually spot on in terms of the overall financial position. So yeah, that's really good. So things are obviously working in most places. So anything else, members, on this one? Or are we going a bit... Councillor Whitworth, please, yeah.
Thank you. It's page 281. It's the item right at the top of the page there under service planning and enforcement. So that's probably one of the worst outcomes.
That's the one I raised. I said that...
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. I beg your pardon.
Problem. I raised that, and no, councillors, we've asked the councillor to let us know, report back on Cabinet. And
my apologies then, Chair.
Yeah, no problem. It's, like I say, we'll get Howard to resend the question that I'd sent him to pass on. So yeah, that seems to be the most noticeable one. Again, I think that we look at this on a regular basis as it does come to OSC. And again, we need to make sure our reserves are being spent properly, and make sure that any slippage is kept to a minimum, because if there's some form of slippage, it means either the timescale wasn't particularly wasn't 100% accurate, or things have occurred to delay the process. So again, be interesting to see what things have happened to delay the process. And it might be the fact that we're reliant on funding from other partners that's not come in. So again, if we can understand what that is. And again, the write-offs on page 295 are, not material. But again, it's just there for information. So I can't see any other questions. I think everybody's, this used to be my bread and butter, so I do find a certain interest in this, but I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. But if people do have any questions in the meantime, because of the lateness of the papers, and this is no criticism, I'm not going on, Dave, so I do apologise if you think I'm going on. If members could email me any questions they potentially want me to put forward for Cabinet's meeting on Monday, I'm more than happy to raise those as well. So just giving you a second bite of the cherry because of that. Right then, I think we'll move on. Yep. So next item on the agenda is to consider the work plan, the updated work plan for pages 11 to 18. Obviously, we've done a slight amendment to the one on the 4th of March relating to Councillor Coles and Hannah to the Home Choice Plus. I would like to put something forward, but if anybody else has got something they want to put forward first, I'm happy for them to come forward with any additional suggestions. Speak now, forever hold your peace. I've heard that somewhere before. What I would like for us to look into, I've been having quite a few complaints about no mow May, which suddenly has become in places no mow May and June. I would like to see the reasons. I'll bring it forward in a bit. I'd like to see the reasons for what is happening, any additional costs, and potentially also not just look from a financial point of view, whether the policy might be changed to doing less areas but leave them there for longer, uncut, and what the benefits are to the environment and the flora and fauna, because members of the public are confused about this still. So I think what I'll do, I'll bring Councillor Wally-Hoggins in first, and then you can come in, Councillor Grocott.
Actually, I really welcome this, Councillor Crump, because every parish council meeting you go to at the moment, it's brought up. But I wonder if we could just expand it slightly, because the other issue that comes up about no mow May perpetually is who's responsible for mowing what. And that goes down to village greens. It goes out, well, why is that patch of grass mown by the council and this isn't mown by the council? What is highways doing that? So I wonder if we could just have yes, the no mow May, definitely. I wonder if we could just call it mowing. That would be quite, for us, for all of us, I think, and for our residents, that actually welcome this. I believe there are maps available of who's responsible for which bit, but then councils report back to me and say, but nobody knows, and then somebody turns up to mow. But I think mowing in general would be how I think our parish councils would applaud you for doing that. Thank you for bringing it up.
And I think the only thing to add on to that is who sort of enforces that, because if the district and the county are saying it's some other organisations who I won't mention responsibility and they're not playing ball, how do we enforce that? So I think I don't think what we're asking is unreasonable, and again we would ask the portfolio holder and officers would give them a reasonable amount of time to come forward with some proposals, and I think we're sort of giving you what we would like. But Councillor Grog, if you could let us know if there's any issues with that, any things that will take longer to do. Yep, that's fine. Michael, could you put the mic on, please? Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry to jump in, but it's part of the same question. I agree with what's been said. I understand the ideas of biodiversity. It's very, very important, particularly in urban and suburban areas, to maintain biodiversity. But rather like 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, they're moving out into the villages as well. And where you've got areas along roadways, major intersections, etc., where they are surrounded by fields, which, okay, they have their field margins reduced because of the reduction in government subsidies to maintain those margins in a biodiverse manner, which is a contradiction in drive. But one of the issues I find every time I come at this time of the year into Stratford, as I go through Ettington, only one example of very, very many I could name, it is extremely dangerous on roundabouts when the grass is growing up to 3 feet high, 2 feet, 3 feet high, and you cannot see, if you're in a low car, I have a low riding car, I cannot see traffic. And so we need to add into that the issues about traffic safety as well. So in other words, it's reasonableness and it's appropriateness of the strategy.
Councillor Grocott, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I hear what you're saying about no mow may, and I welcome your comments. At the end of the day, Stratford District Council does not do no mow may. The Warwick District Council do no mow may on their highways. So I can confirm, because I know that every year there is this confusion about what bits are done, what bits aren't done. And there's also a very big sort of variation in the public about whether they want it doing or not wanting doing. So I ensured that Head of Service had long conversations as part of the new contractor onboarding, had extensive conversations about what was and wasn't involved in no mow may with the county officers. Now, the decision to do no mow may was taken by obviously the administration at the county, and obviously now we have a new administration, so they may have a new view on doing no mow may or not. So that's one area that we do need is to take it back to the county, as I've mentioned before, to those portfolio holders and get clarification that way. But I also agree that there is variation. I mean, I do have concerns about your comments about visibility, because I do confirm that officers have spoken to the contractors to make sure that there is sufficient visibility at junctions, because there's obviously a major, and there should be contouring being done. Okay, so I'll take that away anyway to make sure that that is reviewed. But again, clarification about exactly what is done. We do have at the moment in your ward some areas are supposed to be done by orbit. We have no jurisdiction. We can't just put our mowers on there and run all over it. But we do need to have a mechanism for making sure that all residents have a consistent servicing of their open, their green areas. So thank you. I agree.
Councillor Walcott, please. Yep. Could you put your mic on, please?
So sorry, here's me not putting my mic on. That's not like me at all. Yeah, for the future work plan, could we look at the difficulty some councillors are experiencing with enforcement, and have the whole policy that we have? It was interesting, the debrief we had the other day, last week, about half hour or so, just going in. I think it might be interesting for the committee to look into that a little bit more detail, please.
Yeah.
I'll put some wording together and I will get it to you, if that's all right.
Yeah. Can we take some advice on that one, because enforcement comes under regulatory. So whether it could go through regulatory first and then they come and give us a briefing afterwards. I'm just...
You're absolutely right, Chair. There's two parts of the council's business, the executive side and the council side. The planning committee, the enforcement, that's all council side business, and it is looked after by the regulatory committee. You could request the regulatory committee to look at a particular point, but you couldn't do it yourself.
Councillor Waller-Huggins and Councillor
Just
Fradley,
on that
please.
point, can somebody tell me who the chair of regulatory is, please?
Councillor Fradley, you want to come in, please?
Yes, this was raised at regulatory, and we were told to wait until we'd have this training, and then it was going to come back as an agenda item.
Councillor Passingham?
Yeah, this has come up in one of my parishes, and I think that at the moment the contractor that does our area is very good, and he's taken account of what the local parish has said, and there doesn't seem to be a problem this year. But as I understand it, Warwick District Council have had this problem, and they've said they've gone to a policy more of letting the parishes and the towns set their own standards in terms of this, because a lot of places are doing leaving wilder areas, having areas of wildflower meadow that are cut at certain times, but small areas in their parishes. I know I'm involved in the South Warwickshire Wildlife Network, and there's something like 20 parishes that are doing wildflower areas somewhere on their greens or in their areas. So a more flexible system seems to be more appropriate for this sort of thing. So, but there's a bit of an overlap with the Climate Change Committee that's also, in a way, a scrutiny committee. When talking about those things, I'm just wondering what the position in terms of that sort of thing, because No May is basically to enhance biodiversity, isn't it?
I think the other thing as well, I think that's a good point. I think the other thing as well, I think we need to make sure that we've got the capacity, our contractors have got the capacity to catch up when there's a backlog. You know, this year the grass hasn't been particularly wet, but it's been quite tall. But when it's been wet and then it's cut, it blocks everywhere, blocks up the mowers, blocks up the drains as well. So I think there's that capacity. And I think what would be possible for this, and in terms of enforcement and regulatory, that we could ask them to do, is in the same way that the Cabinet has asked us to do some work on the open spaces, perhaps we could get a ward member guide, particularly on enforcement, and ask regulatory, to produce a ward member guide on enforcement of what members can and can't do and what members will put. And then a similar one, potentially, on the grass cutting as well.
You're talking about your work programme. I don't want to cut across you, but,
Yeah.
but at the moment, do you want grass cutting coming back as a future item? I think
yes,
if we can leave it there for the now,
yeah,
and then we'll come back to you on the other points that you
you've
just
cut me
raised.
short on that one.
Can I just say something?
Yep, just very briefly.
You're raising stuff with highways already. Is Elaine still here? There is actually a bit of an issue at the moment with these desert-like conditions that we're enduring. That long grass in such heat, you know, we do actually have it does present quite the fire hazard when it's in proximity to housing. So actually, I do think we need to expedite some of this at the moment. Looking at, yes, it's not that, it is quite long in some places, and it catches fire really quickly. So I do think there is an issue, particularly in the weather conditions that we're having at the moment. We do perhaps need to look at that with expedience. Thank you.
Yep, I think it's Councillor Pascal, we got anything else?
No.
Brilliant. Right then, I think we've got quite a bit for the work programme. I think if we can, I think once it's gone to regulatory, if Councillor Fradley can inform us of what's happening, then we can do a formal request then. I think that's fair. I don't want to preempt things, and things be covered anyway, so I think that would be unfair and would be obviously compliant. I'd got some issues with some of the recommendation from Cabinet to us on the notice of motion, so therefore it would be hypocritical for me to come in and start demanding things that you're already looking at. So I do think that's quite important. So right then, I've got no other I've not been informed of any urgent business. So I know, what's the time, David? I know Now close this meeting at 12:40, and thank you for your attendance and participation.